Hello, my name is Dan Bowerson. I'm Vice President of Energy and Environment Policy for the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, the trade association for the light-duty vehicle industry. I'm thrilled to be here today to release our fourth quarter 2024 Get Connected report, which provides a state-by-state breakdown of electric vehicle adoption and infrastructure. Please remember, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so please enter your questions into the Q&A portion. So, top line highlights from the fourth quarter of last year. We had 433,843 electric vehicles sold in the US. That represents almost 11% of light-duty vehicle sales, which is the highest quarter that we've had on record. This also represents a 0.3 percentage point market share increase from the third quarter of last year, which results in about 24,000 vehicle sales. As you can see on the left-hand side, 144 different electric vehicle models were sold in the fourth quarter alone of last year. Battery electric vehicles make up the majority of those, but plug-in electric hybrid vehicles have been growing as well. One thing you will notice is that light trucks, which represent utility vehicles, minivans, and pickups, were the largest market share at 81%, with utility vehicles making up 72%. Prices have still remained higher for electric vehicles than the average industry vehicle or typical light-duty vehicle by about $6,000. This is data from Kelley Blue Book, and what this represents, even with the electric vehicles and some of the federal and state incentives, that makes up about 14%. We're still at $6,000 more for an electric vehicle than the industry average. And as we can see here, we've seen significant growth looking back 5 years to 2020, where we were at 2.3% of EV sales representing of all light-duty vehicle sales, to now 10.2% for the full year in 2024. This obviously is our highest year electric vehicle sales that we've had. And we've seen continued growth. You'll notice as well on here that typically the first quarter of the year is the lowest, with the fourth quarter representing the highest quarter per year, which is exactly what we saw in 2024. When we look at year-over-year growth, obviously you can see the difference in the slopes of these, the graph that you see here. When we look back at 2020 to 21, we saw significant growth at 90% year-over-year. That decreased to 62% to 22, 22 to 23 at 35, and we've seen a slower growth rate from 23 to 24, and that could be the result of a number of factors. One, it could be that those early adopters, that first 10%, have already purchased an electric vehicle. They likely have access to home charging. They may have even been willing to make a sacrifice on the vehicle parity of what they were, convenience that they were hoping to have with their vehicle. It's going to take a lot more access to charging, the prices to come down as we continue to grow out and hit that mass market electric vehicle sales. And as you can see here, we do a state-by-state breakdown, and some positive news here. We had 3 states for 2024 that had higher than 20% EV sales. On the flip side, we still have 15 states, or more than 15 states, excuse me, that have less than 5%. So obviously there's still some parity between, or some distance between some of the states that have adopted or higher adoption rates than some of those that have the lower. And again, to get that charging infrastructure, we're going to continue to harp on, but this is what's really necessary for us to hit that mass market and have some of those other states that don't have as high EV adoption rates today to get those adoption rates up. So what does all of this mean for total vehicles on the road? So obviously, as I mentioned, we had just over 10% 2024 sales were electric vehicles, but on the road, obviously those sales result in higher total electric vehicles in operation. We actually topped 2% for the first time in 2024. So that's more than 5.8 million electric vehicles in operation on the roads today in the US, again, topping 2%. So there's still 98% of the vehicles on the road today are operating on internal or operating with internal combustion engines. We're now at greater than 2% of those total vehicles are electrified. So when we look at powertrains, you can see here going back to 2020, typical internal combustion engine or ICE is what we call it, and hybrid sales represented about 97% of vehicle sales. Going out to 2024, that goes down to just under 90%. There were almost 1.6 million EVs sold in 2024. As I mentioned, 10.2% of those were electrified. That's the highest on record. And this is a 0.7 percentage point market share increase over 2023, which results in about 160,000 more electric vehicles sold in calendar year 24 than sold in calendar year 23. So we try to break this down into different types of powertrain. And what we're showing here is the change between on the top from the fourth quarter of 2023 to the fourth quarter of 2024. We saw a significant increase in hybrid electric vehicles, almost 4%. Battery electrics, just under 1%. Not much change in the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle market or fuel cell, but we did see that flip side of the gas and diesel market share dropping by 4.3%. When you look down at the left here, bottom left, we showed the progression of sales between plug-in hybrid, battery electric, and hybrid going all the way back to 2016. So you can see significant increases, and again, the most of that, or the largest portion of that being traditional hybrid electric vehicles. When we break down the electric vehicle sales, and when we say electric vehicle, we mean pure battery electric, which is simply using an electric motor and battery to power the vehicle, to plug-in electric hybrids, which include battery and a gasoline engine, and then hydrogen fuel cell. So that's what we consider electric vehicles. You can see on the bottom right that the largest portion of the growth from 23 to 24 was in that pure battery electric segment, with plug-in hybrid staying pretty constant from 2023 to 2024. So now we're going to flip to charging infrastructure. Obviously, I continue to say, as we're going to increase EV sales, the charging has to be ubiquitous. It has to be reliable and accessible for all EV drivers. So what we have here, we try to show a state-by-state breakdown of the EV charging, publicly available EV charging today. And if you were to do an overlay of charging stations in the states that have higher EV adoption rate, you would notice that those with higher publicly available EV charging stations to those with higher EV adoption rates, there's a direct correlation there. So in the end of 2024, there were just under 70,000 publicly available EV charging stations in the US that represented about 195,000 different ports. Of all of the states that you see here and all of the publicly available charging, 25% of those stations are located in the state of California. And then on the top, we just try to show, similar to what we did with EV sales, just kind of year-over-year growth. And while we've continued to see growth in the publicly available charging, it has not kept pace with electric vehicle sales. We're seeing increases of EV sales greater than the charging being installed to date. So the next logical question is, great, well, how much charging is necessary to support a larger adoption rate of EVs? So the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, funded through the Department of Energy, did analysis of what would be the publicly available charging to support 50% EV sales by 2030, and that would represent 33 million electric vehicles. And what they found is just over 1.2 million publicly available level 2 and DC fast charging would be necessary to support that 50% or 33 million EVs on the road. The analysis also then took a breakdown of a state by state, looking at both level 2, what that would mean for neighborhood, office, retail, and other, and publicly available DC fast charging as well. So we can go state by state with those assumptions and get an idea of what would be necessary to support, again, 50% EV sales by 2030. And what that shows of where we are today to where we would need to be, again, about just under 1.1 million chargers would be necessary from where we are today. We have, again, just under 195,000 charging ports currently installed. We would need over 1 million more chargers to support that 50% EV sales by 2030. So what does that actually mean when we break that down? Well, that would mean we would need 481 chargers to be installed every day, starting at the end of 2024, for the next 6 years to support, again, 50% EV sales. Breaking that down even more, that would be 3 publicly available EV charging stations installed and operational every 10 minutes through the end of 2030. So we have a significant way to go, again, if we were to support 50% EV sales. We also then took it a step further and looked at what's the publicly available charging at the end of the last year and break it down county by county. So what you see here is the red has more, are counties with more charging stations, the blue or purple, much less. So of the over 3,100 counties in the US, 27% of those counties had no public charging station. That represents 854 counties. Now, we fully understand there's many small counties that maybe wouldn't have publicly available charging, but what you can see on the map here is that white throughout the middle of the United States are areas where there's not any publicly available charging. 41% of the counties had 5 or fewer charging ports available. 1/3 of all of the charging is located in just 25 counties. I think you can see by the red and orange where those counties are. And there's 44% of the counties had no DC fast charging, so no publicly available fast charging. So again, looking at the middle there, there's a significant areas that we need to address if we're going to have increased EV adoption on more than just some of the states. So this every quarter we do a spotlight, and this quarter we decided to look at what's the geographic distribution of electric vehicles, charging infrastructure, and state policy implications on EV adoption. So when we look at total electric vehicle registration as a percent of total vehicles in operation, I think you'll notice here the dark blue is more than 10% of those counties. The white or light green have much less. So to date, we have 288 million vehicles in operation, or VIO. 5.8 of those, again, are electric, representing just over 2%, as we've discussed. Half of all of the registered EVs are located in just 41 counties. Again, 50% of all of the EVs located in 41 counties. There's 39 counties that don't have a single registered electric vehicle, and only 493 counties have an electric vehicles in operation rate greater than 1%. 188 of those counties have an EV in operation rate of greater than 2%. So again, I think this just goes to show there's a disparity between some of where we're seeing EV uptake and other counties where we're seeing much, much less. We then decided to take it one step further yet again and look at, we expected that there would be a correlation between EV sales and median household income. And as you can see in the map here, the height of the county is the EVs in operation. The color, the darker blue, is higher median income. So the counties with the highest EV registration are also some of the wealthiest, not shocking. The average median household income for the top 10% of EVs in operation is $78,000. Conversely, the counties with the lowest percent of EVs for the total vehicles in operation, the average median income is $45,000. So again, disparity here. This goes back to the EVs costing more than the average light-duty vehicle sold by about $6,000. So then we also this quarter we partnered with SBD Automotive, and SBD Automotive looked at some of the financial incentives and what they were considering disincentives across the United States. So when we talk about incentives, these could be purchase incentives and those types of things. So what you see on the map is the green and the blue shaded are those states that have incentives available. The gray and the blue as well also show those states that would be considered having disincentives. So there's 12 states that either partially fund or fully fund financial incentives for the purchase of EVs. There's 35 states that impose fees or road user taxes, and these can be used for things like replacing the gas tax. So you'll have a higher registration fee for an electric vehicle, and that's meant to replace the gas tax that vehicle is no longer paying. And there's 5 states that have both, and those again are represented by the blue shade in the map that you see. So again, thank you to SBD Automotive for partnering with us to help provide this analysis in this quarter's Get Connected. So just to recap some key takeaways. So for the fourth quarter, again, 144 different types of EV models were sold in the quarter. That was 434,000 total electric vehicles sold, representing about 10.9% of light-duty vehicle sales. Again, highest quarter on record. For the full year, just under 1.6 million electric vehicles sold, representing 10.2% of light-duty sales. ZEV sales, it has slowed. Again, we talked about infrastructure not being where it needs to be. EV purchase price remains higher. We're going to continue to see more and more EV models on the road, and these EV models that you're seeing are vehicles that customers want. We're seeing more pickup trucks, more utility vehicles. We expect that will continue. Geography, economic conditions, access to charging, EV policies, obviously these all play a role as we're looking to increase EV adoption. So keeping that in mind as we're developing policies of how are we going to increase adoption. So with that, again, thrilled to be here to release our Get Connected. You can go to www.autosinnovate.org/get connected. You can scan the QR code here to receive the report. And with that, happy to answer questions. And again, if you haven't been already, please put any questions you may have in the Q&A, and we will be glad to get to them. So let's go to the questions.
So first question we have, what public charging infrastructure investments have automakers made in recent years? What progress has IONNA made towards its goal of 1,000 charging stations by 2025? So for the first part of that, you've likely seen news of automakers making significant investments in charging infrastructure, making sure that the charging experience for their customers is what their customers would expect. So there have been significant investments. Unfortunately, I don't have a total. There have been a lot of partnerships and solo investments as well. With the question on IONNA, maybe it'd be helpful just for awareness sake. IONNA is a collection of 8 vehicle manufacturers that actually came together and started a charging company focused on high-speed charging. That's BMW, General Motors, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, Mercedes, Stellantis, and Toyota came together and really focused on, like I said, high-speed charging and the charging experience for their customers. I don't have a stat on how many charging stations they have installed and what the progress they are to make well 1,000 by 2025. But that consortium that company is up and running. It's similar to a company that's in Europe, focused on again that charging experience. Next question I see here, are vehicle EV sales and market share percentages inclusive of EV only OEMs? They are. So what you saw today is all OEMs. I know that there's been sometimes you'll see data that actually backs out the EV only manufacturers like Tesla, Rivian, and Lucid. The data that's in our Get Connected report does include all of the electric vehicles sold in the US. I see. Is there any market outlook available starting from 2025 to 2035 or different that also takes into account the steps that the new administration just made? I have not seen anything that takes into account any actions of the administration. Obviously, the administration is looking at reassessing some of the federal regulations. That process, we have not seen any proposals or what that might look like. So I have not seen any actual data showing or market outlook showing what that might look like following change in policy. Is NEVI reporting from charge point operators publicly available? That I actually don't know. So the NEVI program, which was funded through the bipartisan infrastructure law, does include reporting requirements for charge point operators. I have not seen those actual reports, so I'm not sure if they're publicly available or if those are just available through the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. So on the incentives slide, are the disincentives defined as policies that act as an EV disincentive or ICE disincentive? So those are really meant to highlight EV disincentives. And disincentive, when you think of this, it's essentially additional fees or things that might be put on electric vehicles that are not on internal combustion engines. In a lot of states, those fees are on par or parallel to what a normal gasoline vehicle would pay through gas taxes. So those, are essentially showing parity. You're using the same roads. There are some, and we have seen in some states that actually look to penalize EVs by having fees that are excessive for electric vehicles and not on par with their internal combustion engine counterparts. Next question, I suspect range will continue to be a factor for people in the middle of the country / low adoption areas. Any study on average miles driven by owner and impact on adoption? I have not seen any studies on that. However, I would agree that, often it's common that drivers in the middle of the country will drive at 4 miles. So having access to charging stations and range on their vehicles is a very important consideration for them when they are choosing their next vehicle. So the last one I see, what's the impact on recent BYD super fast charging announcement? I don't know. BYD recently did announce that they were going to have super fast charging network. I don't know what that impact is going to be and what that looks like in the US. I think it remains to be seen, but I think you're seeing a lot of different companies and a lot of different opportunities to address that charging experience. And that's what I mean, that customers need to be able to ensure that they have reliable and accessible charging every time they go to charge their vehicle. So that's what we refer to. So you'll see, I think, more and more companies trying to address that issue for their customers. I see, do we have any breakdowns of sales by model and whether the model is eligible for the 30D tax credit? So I don't have any data showing the number of sales using the 30D tax credit, but I do know fueleconomy.gov does have a list of eligible 30D, eligible vehicles that's available at fueleconomy.gov. You'll put in a couple of criteria and then it'll show you the number of vehicles and the models that are actually available for that tax credit. Next one I see here, does Auto Innovators have recommendations or a suggested playbook for state policymakers that can help appropriately accelerate the deployment of charging infrastructure? We don't have a playbook. There are obviously different states have different requirements and their drivers or their customers, or excuse me, citizens use other vehicles differently. So there's no, I don't think, one set playbook. I will say that we have been working closely with public utility commissioners and public service commissioners to try to ensure that the utility process to allow the utilities to have transportation electrification plans and speed up the permitting process for charging stations is expedited as possible. But I don't think there's one single playbook that could be used across every state. So I see a couple other questions coming in the Q&A right now. What incentives exist for investors to build out infrastructure in low adoption areas? That's a fantastic question, and unfortunately one where it's hard for investors to invest in charging stations that don't have a lot of throughput. If you're not having customers, you're not having return on your investment. So that's where it is somewhat challenging, and where sometimes you will see money coming in from the state or the government to help support those until that throughput increases to give you a positive return on your investment. Let's see, do we expect Congress to end the IRA tax credit subsidies for EVs in September budget bill for fiscal year 25? So obviously you've heard the administration talk about ending the EV subsidies. We don't have any expectations of what that actually looks like in terms of the consumer tax credit, which is the 30D and 45W up to $7,500. There has been a lot of activity and a lot of discussion on Congress on how they're going to use that budget reconciliation, where you only need a simple majority in Congress to pass a budget. But we don't have a good sense of what that actually means today for the consumer basic tax credits. I see, has there been any states with adoption of the ACC2, so that's the Advanced Clean Cars 2 standards, where the governor has backed down on their insistence of 42% of all vehicles on lots by 27 or 28? So maybe just to give some background there, the Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulation includes ZEV mandate, which requires vehicle manufacturers to sell a certain percent of vehicles all the way up to, for most of the states, 100% by 2035. There are 12 states, including California, that follow that mandate. 3 of those states back out in 2032 at 82%. To date, there have not been any governors that have backed out of the program. There have been some states where where the states had followed the previous version of the Advanced Clean Cars regulation and not adopted the Advanced Clean Cars 2, but we have not seen any states back down from that EV mandate that have already adopted it to date. I see a next question is, public reports have said Tesla sales have decreased greatly and legacy manufacturers' ZEV sales have increased with an average gains reported here. Do you have any data on that issue? We don't have any data on that issue that we share specific on vehicle automakers. We have seen reports, obviously, of Tesla sales declining and legacy automaker EV sales increasing. I think that's a fair statement, but I don't have a direct correlation or comparison of if Tesla's decreases have resulted exactly in legacy automakers increases. Question here on charge time. So charge time from 80% to 100% is much slower on level 3 DC fast chargers. Why don't automakers share this charge time? It's long charge times for 100% slowing EV market adoption in the US. So I think this is referring to occasionally when you are using a type 3, or excuse me, a level 3 DC fast charger, you will see the charge time start to slow down from 80 to 100%. And usually that is because the battery chemistry inside the electric vehicles is such that manufacturers are wanting to ensure that their batteries and their customers' batteries are lasting and are durable. That charge time between the 80 and 100% can sometimes, if it's done too quickly, damage the batteries and then cause issues such as range later down the road. So that is why you do see some manufacturers, and it depends on their battery chemistry, their strategy, their programming in the vehicle and calibration of what that actually will look like in terms of the charge time or charge speed from 80 to 100%. I do see one other question here of what is the method the EPA or Trump administration will use to end the CARB waiver and the state ZEV mandates? We have not seen, other than executive orders from President Trump, what the actual method will be used to potentially revoke California's authority. So that still remains to be seen. I know, obviously, that was something during the campaign that President Trump was focused on, and we have seen executive orders. But beyond that, we have not seen how the administration might attempt to do that. Not seeing any other questions right now, but I can pause if there's any others. Please feel free to put them in the Q&A or the chat. So question, what method have you used for the prediction? Sorry, I'm not actually sure what the prediction was. The data that we've shared has been from data that we collect in terms of EV adoption and total vehicle sales. We haven't actually predicted anything that looking out to the future of what the market will actually look like. And the question of will we share the slide deck? So the presentation or the webinar is being recorded. That will be available. Additionally, all of the data, all of the figures and graphics come from our Get Connected report. So I know there's a link in the chat for that. You can also scan that QR code if you haven't already, or go to www.autosinnovate.org/getconnected. And all of that information is readily available. Okay, well, with that, I don't see any other questions coming in at this stage. So I really do, we at Auto Innovators really appreciate you attending this webinar. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We're happy to provide that. Please do download that Get Connected report. It will have all of the data that was shared today, along with the graphics and additional resources for you. So with that, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.